Hi, everyone. This is Galila Yosef, Marketing Coordinator at CAI National, and I am excited to welcome you to CAI's HOA Live webinar. This HOA Live webinar series is your opportunity to participate in a product-focused forum with industry experts. The HOA Live webinar series is an ongoing initiative that provides a 30-minute forum, giving you the opportunity to engage with CAI National Corporate members, business partners, and industry experts in a virtual setting. This webinar series is not affiliated with CAI's professional development opportunities, so it does not provide continuing education credits. Instead, it allows you to learn about new and differentiated products and tools to support best practices and can highlight new product launches, sale promotions, and more. After the presentation, there will be a Q&A. As a participant, your audio is not activated. Instead, you can use the chat section to post a question and we will read it out loud. We are also recording this webinar and we will be sending all registrants a link to the recording as well as posting it on hoaresources.com. Today, we are pleased to have Excella Tech, a CI supporting partner, to explore the topic, Your Delinquencies Are Holding Your Association Back. Now I will hand it over to Patrick and Jared to begin the presentation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Hickson. Excited to talk about delinquencies and how they're holding you back for your association. One of the things we want to talk about, because it does come up, has to do with your association's money and what it means to the future of your association. So we need to give you actionable items to help your association be financially healthy. So with that being said, just an introduction about myself. My name is Patrick Hickson. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Excella. Our product, Easy Collect, is the leading collection software and solution for community associations to actually hand off their delinquencies to someone prior to taking legal actions. We do all of that too, but there's a little bit better solution and really more of the right way to do things. I'm also joined today by Jared Tennell with Common Area. I'll let him speak to what he does over there.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Patrick and I have both been in this industry for decades now on the financial services various financial services aspects of the space. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Common Area Financial. We're a financial services platform built solely for property management companies or community management companies that helps them optimize their community's reserve funds and reserve fund management, and then place loans for capital projects. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Glad to have the experts on here, your expertise on here. So let's just talk about what's in the webinar. What are we doing today? How are we helping your community become healthy? The purpose of this is to address how delinquencies impact associations. We're going to be sharing actionable steps to eliminate delinquencies. That's where both of us can come in and help you with that and really prepare associations for the future in case they do need funding or some sort of financial help going down the road. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started and talk about some things. So one of the things that we do touch on is the perfect association. So I'll let Jared speak to the perfect association.
Yeah, look, guys, I mean, first of all, I think we've got a lot of board members as attendees today. Thank you guys for your service. We're talking about like kind of the ecosystem, the financial ecosystem of community associations today. And we all, know that, in a perfect association, right, the property's safe and well maintained, reserves are 100% funded, every homeowner pays their dues on time, but statistically we know, and you guys can, confirm, it's rarely the case, right? I always tell our clients that I see community associations as mini municipalities, And in some instances, some of you might be on the boards of much larger associations that are municipalities. And the reality of it is, they take on personalities of their own. They need different components, right? Depending upon whether you're mid-rise, high-rise, large scale. But statistically, across the industry per CAI, up to 70% of communities, are underfunded, right? And, with historically, back, even 10 years ago, it was really hard. There were, data wasn't available. Software that aggregated information wasn't available. But I think we're in a really good spot now as an industry to change that. Right. So the real world is really much more complex, right? Is the whole point of it, right? You've got a lot of changes that are coming at you guys. If you want to move to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
next slide.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I think what you're looking at, if you're running a mini municipality, it's a business, right? You're impacted by regulations, you're impacted by insurance costs, inflation, right? All of those things, right? Some of you are in, if you're in areas where there's natural disasters that are not very predictable. We've got a lot of changing laws now. I think overall, what we're seeing is a shift in this industry to more proactive financial management, led by some states, some tragedies like we saw in Florida with Surfside, right? What was historically been kind of like this sleepy industry, I think people are starting to wake up to the fact that, you as board members and then your community managers in those companies are managing trillions of dollars of assets, right? And I think the market, whether it's insurance, whether it's the housing agencies, whether it's the municipalities, are all trying to say, let's look at these a little bit more transparently now. And you're being measured now like you weren't 10 years ago or 20 years ago, right?
Yeah,
And I think
I'd
that,
like to add to that,
yeah.
to basically adding one thing to that, just talking about, when we do talk about these delinquencies, these are the things that it affects. Why are they delinquent, and why are boards not being proactive with what it concerns the delinquencies? Is it the idea that it's going to offend your neighbor? You feel like you're being the bad guy, because you're turning over to an individual? Is it a situation where the actions of a few are affecting the whole? A lot of people give this kindness. Well, I don't want to put that burden on Jim next door if he's having hard times or things like that. So it's really setting yourself up for success so that you are prepared and you have the reserves when the natural disaster. I'm in Florida, so I deal with that, and a lot of you people deal with that on a daily basis. So we've got natural disasters like we're seeing now with the insurance and supply chains going on. Uh, Changes in regulations from state to state. Everything like that can really affect what's going on.
Yeah, and I think it's, all this to say that, there was a period of time where there wasn't that demand for transparency, right?
Yeah.
You were
Yep.
able to run your community almost like a mom and pop hardware store, right? Jim will pay when he can, Sally will pay when he can. I think now because of the demands of and technology allowing for more transparency, the awareness and the requirement to report, information in a more timely way, whether it's for resales, whether it's for housing agencies, whether it's for insurance renewals. Suddenly, people know a lot more about this industry that they have in the past, and so I think that's where you guys really um, kind of need to seek out tools to help you manage because it's really
Yeah.
something that historically was always kind of like a sleepy backwater kind of industry, right? But I think the dynamics are changing, and the whole concept about financial resiliency is what the industry is talking about, whether it's community association, whether it's in the governor's office down in Tallahassee or the governor's office here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, people are more aware of community associations, which I think is a good thing because I think it's leading to innovation, right? That's what we're going to, at the end of the day, what we're talking about here today, right? Excella is an innovation in this industry that wasn't even possible 10 years ago, right? But I think, all that to be said, the magnitude of importance for managing these things is really important. So, I think from a volunteer's perspective, it really behooves you to seek out expertise. And I think also, what I like to bring to people's attention is all of this is falling to the CAMs or community managers' plate. They are uh, wonderful folks. They are, I always call them master jugglers, right? They're great at getting shit done for you guys. But the reality of it is now, with all of these additional pressures, it's really unreasonable for us to think that they're experts at everything, right? Their job becomes really as the trusted advisor for you guys, helping you navigate all of these changes that are happening in the industry.
Yeah, one of the things that I look at this screen right here, and I'm just shocked at the massive number of 270 billion capital projects needed in the next 10 years. We see that number where we say approximately 70% are underfunded. I probably think it's larger in most areas, specifically in areas that I deal with, whether it's, your Florida communities, your coastal East Coast communities, where you're talking about condominiums or large HOAs, things like that, because um, I know this. I'm in a community with 1,500 homes, but our reserves are way too low for what we're going to have to do in the
Yeah.
next 10 years. And it becomes scary. So when you look at a market that we're in where we could conceivably see a downturn where delinquencies are not going to stay the same, they're going to go up. So being prepared now for that and having a solution, being proactive rather than reactive is a big part of taking care of your delinquencies and making sure that you're on top of the situation and ready for the future.
Yeah, and I think for those of you that might be on uh, the conference here and are looking at that same situation that Patrick just said, you're not alone, I guess, is
Yeah.
really some of the point of this slide is like this is an industry-based thing for a long period of time. There was no kind of mark to market or any sort of like guidelines or
Yeah.
that could be used, but all that's changing, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, change is hard. And I think a lot of you are probably looking at numbers and going, like Patrick said, 270 billion. That's across the industry. And those are for items that are outside of the reserve study. So that's
Yeah.
just, you know, outside of the reserve study. We already know the reserve studies are underfunded as well. And so I think all this to say, it's like what happens when your association doesn't have enough money? Because it's basically every association. There's very few that we find, even in areas where we've got some very wealthy communities as clients, things come out of left field. Inflation came out of left field, right? The idea of suddenly they thought they were funded, they had a few $1 million, and that elevator project is 50% more, right? Like
Yeah.
suddenly you guys are finding yourselves in these, your positions are much more as financial stewards, in a much more expansive way than it was historically. And so what do you do when you don't have enough money, right? You've got special assessments. Generally, those are a tool that a lot of people use, but you can really tire out a community if that's the only lever you use, right? And I think as Patrick can probably speak to statistically, with Excel clients, they probably see some sort of correlation to the number of special assessments correlating to spikes in arrears, right?
Yeah, absolutely. When you see situations of special assessments pop up, honestly, a special assessment is because you were not properly funded in the first place.
Yeah.
So you were not planning for the future. You were, as a board, or in our case with my board, it was a situation to where, oh, but we want to keep the assessments low for everybody. We want to keep everything low. Why do we have this $100,000 over here in this reserve fund? I mean,
Yeah.
what are we saving that for? The rainy day? The answer is yes. Increasing assessments is a necessity, because if you don't do that, and we see this all the time here in Florida, even in high-rise condos where the assessments are high and you're paying $700 a month, so, and even way more, you're paying assessments of that amount, but that is in no way going to cover some of these capital improvements that come up that will require special assessments. Frankly, we get a lot of files because of the fact that it just has to do with the special assessment. Somebody can pay their $400 a month, but then when everybody in the condominium is hit with a $40,000 special assessment because the roof has to be ripped off or all windows have to be replaced, whatever it may be, we see a lot of that in where we are. Nobody's prepared for that. So special assessment is a reactionary. It is
Yeah.
situation. We're not being proactive in taking care of it. We do need to increase assessments. I mean, it is something that is
Yeah.
very, very important. And then down at the bottom, reducing operating costs. I mean, a lot of times you see, when I lived back in Georgia, I had lived in a neighborhood that had a management company. And oh, well, look, we're paying $15,000. I know that's really low these days for a lot of things, but oh, we're paying $15,000 to this management company. We can save a bunch of money by just being self-managed. Well, we did that, and we did that for 1 year. And then we went right back to another management company. So it's one of those things to where this is the time to potentially bring in experts like Jared, myself, other experts you have, because the thing to remember with us is that we don't just know the business we're in. We've been in this business for multiple decades, and we do know the other experts, and we can help out. So utilize the people, even if you are in a self-managed community.
Yeah.
Sorry,
And what
sorry to bust in on that, but go ahead.
That's all right. No, I like to use the analog of being a municipality because I think it helps, at least it
Yeah,
helps me organize my mind a little bit. And so when I do special assessments, it's like, when my, road needed to be repaired, right, because of a sinkhole, I suddenly didn't get a bill, right? Right? My mill rate went up, right? In aggregate. And so I think like I use that as an analog because it's like assessments are one of the tools. What we're finding now is what you have to do is figure out what the balance of all of these that works for you, right? I think loans, just like, if you look at municipalities, what do they do to right side their capital needs, right? They float bonds, right?
yeah,
So, having a loan isn't like a mark of negativity on your community. The housing agencies, the insurance companies actually like to see it because they say, you know what, there is a finance ready, proactive organization that's getting their stuff done,
hmm,
right? And so the idea is it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can do a blend, right? And that really, I think, over time is really what success looks like. It's like knowing what those different levers are and making sure you're pulling them at all times. But the core of all of this, right? Like whether you even could get a loan or whether even some people need to special assess and they can't because they know the minute they do, half of the people aren't going to be able to pay it, right? So I think that at the core of this really means that operations need to be running on pretty smoothly, right?
yeah,
Professional management, professional arrears management, professional cash management, right? All of these things need to be kind of firing on all cylinders because then you have options, right? The
yeah,
alternative is you get to a situation where you have no options except for a special assessment, right? You want to kind of make sure that you're not limiting the alternatives that you have to raise money for your community, right? You want to keep special assessment on the table, loan on the table, multi-year increase on the table, managing your operating costs more effectively on the table, right? You don't want to necessarily get yourself pigeonholed where only one of them is possible, right? And yeah.
Yeah, a lot of
So
times I think it could probably, and it goes right into what you're talking about,
yeah,
what lenders want.
yeah,
Sometimes it's a catch 22 that we have to help out with, and we'll discuss that later. But we're not financially stable enough to get the loan.
yeah. And
It's
I would
like,
even
how am I supposed to work that? But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think even, this slide I would even change to say, like what does the financial community want? Because what's starting to happen is it's not just a lender looking at you when you're looking to get a loan. The housing agencies are looking at you every time somebody wants to buy a house in your community. Insurance companies are now starting to scratch on the financial health of your community to set your premiums, right? So healthy cash flow, consistent dues collection, invested reserves. Commitment to reducing delinquencies. What that really means is they don't want to see a ton of people that have owed you money for a long period of time
Yeah.
that, that's obvious that that hasn't been addressed. The dirty little secret of this industry is typically, uh, you know, arrears can be limited by just having the right plan, right? And getting after people before it gets too late. And so, I would take this slide for those of you that are on the call and look at this and say, this isn't just about, a lender if you're looking to borrow money for a project. This is how the financial community really looks at you and what they want to see, right? They want to see the healthy cash flow, consistent dues. They like to see fees going up consistently. They don't like to see spiky special assessments. That to them that looks like uncertainty, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah, and with those fees going up, with those assessments going up, it needs to also have the last one that's in green, commitment to reducing delinquencies.
yeah.
And that is truly what we're here about. Your delinquencies are holding you back because let's be honest, that is the lifeblood of your community. If you have a financially stable community, all of the other stuff kind of takes a back seat to it.
And people ask us all the time. We get a lot of loan requests that come in, and I'd say as high as 25% of them, we have to tell people that their delinquencies are higher than most banks like to see.
Yeah.
There's no magic number. I think a good threshold is generally you want to manage your community the way that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac look at you, which is, you don't want your delinquencies to exceed, 10% of the unit owners. Because you've got to think about it. The financial community looks at delinquencies like vacant apartments, right? So suddenly, if 10% of the people in your community aren't paying, then whatever budget you gave your insurance company, your lender, or goes out in your resale packages, they're automatically discounting that by 10%, right? So that what does that normally mean? That normally means if you can't change your operating budget in the middle of the year, right? So what does that mean? You end up underfunding reserves,
Yeah.
right? Because that line item at the very bottom of your budget that says reserve transfer, that's the one that just gets smaller and smaller and smaller as delinquencies get bigger.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that we come into with our financial partners. People like Jared is, we do have communities that come to us, and we've actually even had lending institutions that are trying to do loans for people come to us and say, "Hey, I've got a community that is at 24% delinquency right now. 24% of their people are delinquent on their assessments." Um, it's the catch 22. We need to get that down. We have communities give us those delinquencies, and within 90 days we're usually able to get that below 10% back to a decent number to where the banks are okay with it and things move forward. Now, the impact of high delinquencies. Obviously, we know it all comes down to cash flow. We've got delinquencies leading to less available funds. Lack of funds hinder everything. Let's just be simple with it. Challenge of long-term planning. We've already talked about, the capital improvements that are needed. My delinquencies are so bad that I can't get a loan. Increased financial pressure. It's like I said in the beginning, the actions of a few are affecting the whole. Why am I paying for the next door neighbor's lack of activity within it when potentially it's a situation to where a management company or a board is just not being proactive in getting those to collections? Difficult accessing funds, which is what Jared was talking about the future and what's coming.
Right? Like by avoiding that conversation, with that one awkward conversation you think you need to have, the reality of it is a professional puts you as a board member at arm's length to that
Yep.
neighbor that's delinquent. And more importantly, that one neighbor that's delinquent has a waterfall effect, right? That ends up putting pressure on everybody the longer you let that go.
So let's talk about some of the things that can really help your community. If you've ever been on a demo of my product with me, if we've ever talked in any extent about collections and setting your association up, and frankly protecting you as a board member, one of the main things that I push all of our um, community clients is having a uniform collection policy. Certain states require it. That doesn't mean everybody's doing it, but certain states require it. And what that means is you're setting up parameters. You are setting up parameters to say everyone has to pay this. If you don't, the next step is going to be you are going to be sent to collections, no matter who you are. I don't care if you're my next door neighbor. I don't care if you're a board member. We follow these rules because they are rules. If someone is 90 days past due, they don't just get a friendly reminder. They get sent to Excella, and Excella starts their process. Basically, what it does, one of the big things that's really good for you board members on here, is it does help you out with your friend down the street that is delinquent. It's the whole wash your hands. I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. You will be sent to collections at 90 days, and that it is the community's policy. It is not my policy. So there's all of that. Another big thing that setting your community up for success has to do with resolving delinquency before trying to seek funding. That's one of those things I hear time and time again. I'll use this scenario where the assessments are low. Time and time again, I hear people say, "Oh yeah, but our assessments are only $400. We don't want to burden this homeowner with being sent to collections over $400." That's wrong, because you know who you are burdening when you don't burden that homeowner that didn't pay that $400. You're burdening all of the other people within that community, and that is not fair. No, who said life was fair? Well, let's try to get these communities as close to fair as we can. So when you do that, when you let somebody go, you're setting an example, basically saying, "Hey, oh, they're not really serious about this. I don't have to worry about this until next year, until maybe I'm over $1,000 due. Now I'm over 2 years in arrears with this homeowner." Set the precedent, because I guarantee you, if you send someone to collections and they have to pay a collection fee when they only delinquent for $400, I guarantee you they're not going to do it again next year. That's one of those things. Go beyond the minimum communications required by law. That has to actually do with things that we do, meaning let's talk about the legacy way of collecting. The legacy way of collecting, okay, you either the treasurer or your management company sends out an invoice. Maybe they send a 30-day or a 60-day reminder, and historically it has been sent to the attorneys at that point. This is what we saw back in the 2008-9 crisis, and that's why everybody ended upside down so much, because there wasn't really much hands-on. It was sent to attorney. And let me put it this way, because I came from that side of the industry. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just an archaic way of handling things. There is a place for a company like Excella to come in at that point and do more, because just sending a letter, a lien letter, an intent to lien, anything like that is not enough, because that's going to end up on a coffee table or a dining room table and people are going to forget about it. Okay, maybe they got a lien. Who cares? The lien doesn't affect me until I sell, because I know they're not going to foreclose on me. Well, when you get to a company like Excella, we're going to do more. We're going to do more than you're allowed to do because of FDCPA. We're going to make phone calls. We're going to send emails. We're going to send text messages. We're going to use every multi-channeled approach we can to collect this money. So it's about really.
Yeah, if I could
Yeah, go
just,
ahead.
and I think as a volunteer board member too, it's it's managing your own personal risk as a board member, right? You don't want to be involved in the collections process as a volunteer, right? You're volunteering your time to help guide the community, right? You don't
Yeah.
want to be the one writing letters, calling people. There are professionals that do that. They do it well. And then the idea is you are walking in the hallway or you're out, walking your dog and somebody wants to bring it up to you. You can say, we've hired professionals to deal with that. I am just a volunteer. You don't need to be dealing with the stress of it or the risk, right?
And there's legal aspects to that. In most states, you shouldn't be doing that
Correct.
anyway. So
That's
if
what I
you
mean by
are,
risk. The idea
you
is
can
if
contact
you're
us, and yeah, you need to be aware that you cannot send, let's say in most states, a collection letter, so to speak, because you are practicing the law of collections and you do not have a license to do that. So
yep.
a lot of that
Good.
happens. So really what we're trying to do here when we do it is we're trying to bridge the gap. Financial stability, funding opportunities, uncollected delinquencies we see under the bridge. That's where we step in. That's where we help out. Don't go straight to from invoicing a homeowner to legal action. There is an opportunity for a company like Excella. Oops, did I go the wrong way? There is an opportunity for a company like Excella to come into things, because when you are looking for someone that is going to help you out, you need to make sure that you're using the right partners. And that's why, like, people like Jared and I know each other, because you need to know that there's no financial risk, so to speak, for your association, that the delinquencies and the fees are being passed through to the homeowner. Because one thing that irritates me a lot of times when I take over a new association is, oh, we just spent thousands and thousands of dollars paying off the old attorney that was not successful in doing what they do. You know, that should be passed on to the delinquent homeowner. Assessment distribution is a big deal too, making sure that you've got the right partners, everything's going to be distributed appropriately. Let's talk about integrations. Make sure there are integrations. If you are using a professional management company and they are using a software, an industry standard software, your partner should have integrations with that. They should be able to pull that data to make things more efficient. They should be using multi-channel approaches, whether, like I said before, whether it's letters, calls, emails, text messages, self-service portals where people can set up payment plans. All of this is coming from technology that did not exist 10 years ago. So if you've been using the same outlet that you were using 10 years ago, you're not getting this kind of service. You're not getting an ethical approach to your homeowners. You're not getting someone that's going to call and explain in layman's term to the homeowners, this isn't going to go away. You need to take care of this. We need to get you on a payment plan or get you paid up. Otherwise, it will go on, move on down the road. Listen, one thing that our president got me to saying a lot is, we're in the business of working it out, not putting them out. The last thing we want to do, we are not in the foreclosure business. That does no one good. We are in the work it out business. So we want to do everything we can to make the associations whole. All right. So talking about, we're coming up to the end of our time here, talking about success. So let's just reiterate what we've talked about. Delinquencies are solvable. You don't just have to just sit and drown in your delinquencies. Companies like ours can help you out. So we're always there. Eliminating delinquencies not only improves your association today, but prepares you for the future. That's like what Jared was saying when we talk about reserves. Let's make sure that you are ready. Make sure that these capital improvements can be done down the road. Make sure that if the potential comes up that you may need financial help down the road, a loan that you are stable enough to do that. Jared, you got anything to add on this one?
No, I think it's
Okay.
great. I think it's
Yeah.
well said.
Yeah. So that brings us to the end. We said a lot here. We're going, like they said, we're going to make this available to you. We've got everything that you need to learn more of, whether it has to do with funding, reserve studies, delinquencies, to get you to a healthy situation. Everything is there. We can help with high delinquencies. We can help with the consultation and fiscal strength, future planning, and everything that you may need down the road. Um, I just want to say thank you for your time. I don't have it on my screen, so let's see if we got some questions on here that we need to answer.
Yes, Patrick, we actually have one question.
Okay.
It says, do you as a collection agency accept the payments, or do you have the owner in collections to pay to the management companies? And do you set up payment plans for an owner in collections and keep track of their payments?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes, we do actually accept the payments. One of the things that we do when a file is turned over to us, it's very similar to what would happen with an attorney. We kind of become the collector of record. So we make it very easy for them to make payments through our system. They can actually set up a payment plan through our system. One little thing I'll tout about that no one else has: we are the only collection company that has a self-provisioning payment plan portal, meaning that collections are a nasty thing to talk about. It's embarrassing. Nobody wants to talk about that or make that phone call. In every one of our letters, every phone call, email, we talk about our portal, which they can log in, they can see where they are, they can actually go in and set up a payment plan through that system and move forward. We just need a few simple parameters from an association, like, okay, how many months are you comfortable with? Obviously, we can do payment plans outside of that number, but if your association says we're fine with you setting up payment plans, as long as the payment plans don't go out past 12 months, we can set it up like that. Another big thing that happens too is, like Jared mentioned, walking down the street and having to answer these collection questions. You can send them directly to us to handle that, because we do handle the disputes. We get disputes all the time. We welcome disputes. I like to say there's no such thing as a bad conversation when it comes to collections. They can come screaming at us, cussing at us, whatever. We are trained to turn that around with a kind word, and get them to start paying and understand that this isn't going away. Because if it does get to that point, which with us it very rarely does, we do have the ability to move on down the tracks towards foreclosure. So we can do that. So yes, we can accept payments. We do that. One last thing about the payments is that we do not hold those funds until they are paid in full. We will make disbursements to the association to help you with your financial issue.
Thank you, Patrick. I believe we have two more questions in the chat. One question says, do you perform financial audits? And the second
No.
question is, but the payments go to the association. So two questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first
Yeah.
one's probably a Jared question.
Yeah. So neither Excel or Common Area provides audits. That only a CPA's going to do that. But if what you were asking for was more of like a delinquency audit, meaning like, hey, are you doing okay on your own? I'm sure Patrick
Yeah.
would be happy to take a look at your situation and give you, you know, an idea of how to improve if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. That is one thing that we can do. You can provide us with that documentation. Or if you are an association or a management company that is using one of our integration partners, one of the accounting firms that we integrate with, we can do that on day one. We can actually tell you exactly where you stand and say, here is your percentages. Here are the people that owe the most. These are the ones that should be, you know, turned over to collections at this point because they are above your threshold, which has to do circle back around to the uniform collection policy.
Yep.
And
Nice. Looks like we got a
was
couple.
there another question? I can't. Did we answer
Looks
both
like
of them?
we've got two others.
Yes.
Do you want us to take them or?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So one says, once you get the collection file, do you do all the communications or do I have to send a warning letter that they file is going to collections?
So that depends. That depends on state statutes. But once you have done what we call your condition precedents, where you're required to send them the invoice, and then let's say you send a courtesy letter at 30 days, and you're all the way at 60 days, and they have not responded. Depending on what state you're in, you may have to send a letter prior to it coming from us. But we can talk offline about that. But yes, once it is turned over to us, we do everything. We send all of the letters and everything is available to you. That's the great thing about this is that, you know, you don't have to chase attorneys down for information. You don't have to beg for reports. Easiest way to put it is if we know it, you know it. So you can actually access any of the information. And
And
then
then
it
the last,
says, yeah, what about future charges? Do you collect future charges? Yes, we will. So if we set up a payment plan, we're going to take that into consideration when we set up that payment plan. That way, let's say they set up a 12-month payment plan, it's not only collected the money that they were in arrears, it's collected those future assessments. That way, when the payment plan is over, they're at a zero balance.
and then we got a request for a demo.
Yes, that's the answer.
That's an easy one. Yeah.
Yes, you can request via our emails that you've got up there. But you can definitely do that through our website and it'll go and actually it will flow through me. So I'll make sure that the person that you speak to is aware of the specific state statutes and laws in whatever state you preside.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick and Jared. I believe that is all the time that we have today.
Yeah, thank you for having
Right.
us.
Thank you very much.
So yeah, thank you for this valuable presentation. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. As a reminder, we will also be emailing you the recording of the presentation. So please be on the lookout for that. Again, thank you so much. And I hope you all have a great day.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Oh, all right, everyone. Have a wonderful day.